Welcome, everyone. Why don't we go ahead and get into a meditative posture? Meditation is an act of kindness. We start by letting the body get into a stable posture so that we're not constantly distracted by wanting to move or wanting some little pain to go away. So setting ourselves up into a stable posture can be understood as an act of kindness. We can also do ourselves the kindness of taking a few deep breaths and really letting the exhales lengthen. The long exhale is a signal to our nervous system that our mind can settle down just as the body settles down. And on your own time, you can let breathing return to a normal rhythm. Meditation is an act of kindness in that any peace or equanimity that we cultivate during this meditation will spread to the next people we encounter. If our mind comes to a more peaceful, more kind place, when we go home to our parents or perhaps to coworkers we'll see tomorrow, the next people we see will be the benefit, will be the recipient of this peace and this kindness that we feel. Meditation is an act of kindness towards ourselves. It's our practice in letting go of what causes our suffering, letting go of our expectations about how the world should be or how we should be. Simply accepting the world as it is. By doing this, our lived experience becomes more harmonious. We're not constantly grasping at thought or trying to achieve a certain feeling. Meditation helps us learn to be with the world just as it is. And so all of meditation is kindness. And kindness is always the appropriate attitude in meditation. There's no room for self-judgment. There's no room to look at the mind and not like what you see. The appropriate attitude is always just to be kind. And one way you can be kind to yourself during meditation is to notice if the mind is having trouble staying present. It's getting lost in thought or worry or anything other than the present moment. This is very natural, but it's also suffering. So it can be kind to yourself to provide the mind with something to rest on that's not thought. One way to do this is to let attention rest on the breath. When the mind is caught up in thought, as it habitually is, there's great potential for suffering. It's very easy for the mind to spin off into worry, greed, or anger, or daydreaming. When the mind is on the breath, it's not really much to do with that other than to be present. So by offering the mind that pathway, you offer it a place of safety from all the suffering that comes from being lost in thought. It's an act of kindness. And when the mind inevitably gets lost in thought, the thing to do is just return to the breath with kindness. There's no reason to be anything other than kind. This life is too short and too precious to be angry at yourself or to be critical. You didn't choose to be lost in thought in any case. Just come back with kindness. And sometimes circumstances are such that the mind is able to stay present without the anchor of the breath. In that case, or even if the mind is pretty close to that, the kind thing to do can be to let go of the breath and let the mind open into a wider, spacious awareness. When the breath isn't necessary, it can be let go of. And the mind can rest in an even more free and flowing state. So you might look to see if that's the case. And it's okay if it's not. And sometimes distraction arises. The thing to do is just treat it with kindness and acceptance. And simply the way experience is in this moment. And if you greet that with aversion, you're simply causing yourself suffering. If you greet it with kindness, you're not. You might see if the mind can incline towards whatever is present with even more kindness. There is no limit to the amount of kindness that the mind can express. You are safe in this moment. There's no harm that can come to you from embracing what is. Everything can be welcomed. I just wanted to take a moment to thank you all for your practice, both here today and in general. Thank you for the kind intention, the kindness and the good intention that you put out into the world. It makes the world a better place. And speaking as a part of this world, it's appreciated. Well, thank you all for coming. Hi, Jesse. I have a couple of announcements. Let's see. So next week there is a Dhammadeepa is teaching a retreat this weekend, the 6th and the 7th. And this is with Brad Hunter, and it's a retreat on exploring how our minds and bodies are designed to engage with the world. This is online. There's also a lunch for the Sangha on the 7th at noon, and a Sangha brunch on Saturday, April 20th. Right, so I'd like to start off today with a story. This is one of the Jataka tales, which are they're allegories about the Buddha's past lives. So they're not teachings of the Buddha, they're teachings. Often there's like a moral component involved. They're just kind of short allegories to illustrate some, I think, helpful way of being, I guess. And this is the story of the four harmonious brothers. In former times, in the jungles near Varanasi, a pheasant, a rabbit, and a monkey and an elephant lived in friendship and harmony. The four brothers declare that although their minds were harmonious, it was sad that in the world that there was so little respect held by the young for the old. They decided to show respect for each other according to the tradition of the Dhamma. The pheasant taught the others how to follow the moral conduct of not taking lives, not taking what was not given, not speaking deceptive words, not committing sexual misconduct, and not taking intoxicants. Then each animal led similar types of animals to themselves on the path of morality. Happiness and comfort increased greatly in the world. At the time, the king, his ministers, and the general population had the proud belief that good times were due to their own merit. In order to determine who was responsible for the peaceful times, they gathered together and asked a hermit to tell them the cause of their happiness. Through his mental powers, the hermit explained that the country's wealth was not due to the power of any of the people, but to the merits of the four animals in the forest who were keeping the 5 precepts of moral conduct and leading others on the path. He advised them that they too should behave like these animals. Following this advice, most of the people in that region began to keep the 5 precepts. And as a result, after they died, they were reborn in the Deva realm. And so the thing I want to talk about today is kind of illustrated in the story. The pheasant who lived a kind of morally upright life, he lived a life of peace and harmony, and that spread to the other animals, and they lived lives of peace and harmony. And those other animals spread that to the people in the kingdom, and the whole kingdom lived lives of peace and harmony. And this Dhamma that we practice, when we practice, the way we act becomes more and more in harmony with the world around us. Life takes on a quality of flow and of ease to it. This practice is the practice of letting go of the self, and that letting go of the self is letting go of resistance to what is. When resistance is let go of, there's just an acceptance for whatever comes up. This can be seen in small ways and large ways. We can see this acceptance and this harmony in the moment. when thoughts and emotions arise, when we come to practice, we may grab onto them very frequently, and we may spin off into papancha, into thought, into suffering. But as we practice, we learn to do less and less of that, and thoughts simply flow into being and pass away on their own. And we can see this in larger examples too, and kind of big picture things. Life has events of kind of great consequence to them. Someone we care about dies. We may have great hopes for our career, and they may crumble. We may enter a relationship, and that relationship may fail. And if we don't practice, sometimes those things can cripple people, and they can live in the shadow of their reaction to those events for their whole life. But as we learn to practice, we learn to flow with them and accept whatever comes, and whatever our reactions to these things are. They may, perhaps shift us around a bit. Our life may move in a different direction, but we can still kind of flow along with what's presented to us. And this idea of harmony is fundamental to the Dhamma. One of the core teachings of Buddhism is the Eightfold Path, which are 8 kind of principles by which to live your life. And the Eightfold Path is divided into 3 categories. So there's the wisdom factors, there's the ethics factors, and the concentration factors. Wisdom factors are right view, so samadhi, and that is basically seeing where we're heading and kind of understanding the Dhamma. There's right intention, sama sankappo, which is the kind of intention or resolution to follow the Dhamma. We have the ethics factors, sila. There's right speech, samabhakka, which is not causing harm with our words. And likewise, there's right action and right livelihood, which are samakamanto and sama avijo, not causing harm with our actions or our livelihood or how we live our job or life or those sorts of things. There's the concentration factors, samadhi. There's right effort, samavayamo, which is you don't want to put in too much effort, but you don't want to put in too little effort. There's also the aspect of doing things that help the mind rest in wholesome mind states. There's right mindfulness, which is samasati, awareness of mind and body, and maybe some discernment about what we do. And lastly, there's right concentration, samasamadhi, which is basically sitting practice or some kind of formal meditation. And so I gave the Pali terms for those, for all the Eightfold Path, samadhi, samakappo, samasankappo, and so on. And you might have noticed that the first part of that, sama, was in all of the terms. And I translate it here as right because that's how it's often translated. So right view, right intention, and so on. It's also often translated as wise, so wise view, wise intention, and so on. But I've also heard it translated as harmonious, which I'm no Pali scholar, but that fits with my understanding of the Dhamma. These are things to do that bring about a harmonious life, or bring about a harmonious life. So that's what I want to talk about today, that this idea that this practice that we do brings about harmony. And I want to talk about two points in particular. First, there's the harmony between the conscious mind and the unconscious mind. Often when we come to practice, there is a misconception that takes place. And I would say that this happens to probably almost everybody. Maybe not literally everybody, but probably almost everybody. I have a nice quote about this from Pema Chodron. This is from When Things Fall Apart. Um, so sometimes, late at night or on a long walk with a friend, we find ourselves discussing our ideas about how to live and how to act and what is important in life. If we're studying Buddhism and practicing meditation, we might talk of no self and emptiness, of patience and generosity, of loving kindness and compassion. We might have just read something or heard some teachings that turned our usual way of seeing things upside down. We feel that we've just reconnected with the truth that we've always known, and if we could just learn more about it, our life would be delightful and rich. We tell our friends of our longing to shed the huge burden we feel we've always carried. We're suddenly excited and feel it's possible. We tell our friend of our inspiration and how it opens up our life. It is possible, we say, to enjoy the very same things that usually get us down. We can delight in our job, delight in riding the subway, delight in shoveling snow and paying bills and washing dishes. You may have noticed, however, that there's frequently an irritating, if not depressing, discrepancy between our ideas and good intentions and how we act when we're confronted with the nitty-gritty details of real life situations. So she talks about it as the discrepancy between how we think we should act and how we actually act. I will broaden that a little bit to talk about the discrepancy between our conscious mind and our unconscious mind. So often when we come to practice, sometimes people get quite gung-ho about it. And, you've heard about the end of suffering and you're all on board and you understand the logic, you know that suffering is caused by wanting things to be other than they are. And you understand that by doing your sitting practice, you can see the world clearly such that you don't do that. And so you have this great conscious desire to sit. Maybe you want to sit every day and you want to sit 5 hours a day and you want to go on retreat and you want to do all the things. And often many people have the experience of feeling something like that and then the reality being quite different. That's definitely happened to me. Yeah, for many years, that would have described my practice. In particular, I'm thinking of one example. After I had a big opening, I was very gung-ho. I was very on board with the whole project, and I just wanted to quit my job and I wanted to find a monastery and just sit, and not one of those monasteries where they make you do lots of work, just one where you can sit all day. I was very excited about this. And I had the good fortune to talk to two teachers who I knew were further along than me and I thought were very wise and I knew had my best interests at heart. And I talked to them and their advice was that I not do this. That was not the right thing for me. And it turns out that was good advice. I'm glad I didn't end up doing that. My conscious mind was all on board, but my unconscious mind was having some misgivings. And if I would have just listened to my conscious mind and gone through with it, there would have been a lot of suffering involved. And so the issue is that we think that we're the conscious mind, and that makes perfect sense because that's what's available to us. That's what we can see. We can only see the unconscious mind by inference, really. So we think we're the conscious mind, but what we are is this twin system of conscious and unconscious together. And so when we think we should be able to practice like we want to practice, we're understanding the world incorrectly. The system is not set up that way. There's an excellent metaphor for this issue. It's been around for a very long time. It's of the elephant and the rider. So in this metaphor, the rider is our conscious mind and the elephant is the unconscious mind. And I think this illustrates the problem pretty well. A writer might know exactly where they want to go and might think they should just be able to kind of go there because, the writer could just walk in that direction if they wanted to. But the elephant has a mind of its own. And if the elephant wants to go a different way, well, the elephant is a lot stronger than the person. And so it's probably going to happen that what the writer wants to do is not going to come about. So if you notice this disconnect in you between what you want or how you think you should practice and how you actually practice, and maybe it's a little bothersome or maybe there's a little self-criticism, the thing to do is realize that you're playing a different game than you thought. You're not playing the game where you just kind of figure out what you need to do and do it. You're playing the game where you have to learn to get the unconscious mind on board with that too. So it's a completely different thing. I have a very nice graphic that illustrates this. I have one copy for those of you guys in the room, so maybe you can share. It's on the little owl tab right there. And I'll share my screen for you folks. Yeah, sorry about the photo quality. I took that with my phone. So this is an adaptation of a Tibetan framework for the path of practice. So there's quite a bit going on here, but most of it is not relevant to my point. So if you see, there's 10 stages with 10 little numbers below them, and these represent the stages of the meditator as the meditator progresses through practice. And the relevant points here are the elephant and the meditator, and you can see that in each stage, there's an elephant, an unconscious mind, and the meditator, the conscious mind. And you can see that when you start practice at the bottom, in stage 1, the elephant is not listening to the meditator at all. It's going its own direction, and the meditator is chasing after the elephant. And you can see that it doesn't kind of catch up to it until stage 3, where he finally gets a rope around the elephant, but the elephant is still leading him along, and he progresses a little bit more into stage 5, where he's finally leading the elephant and kind of progressively taming the elephant as practice goes on. And it's not until stage 10 when those two things are in harmony, where he's sitting on the elephant's back and they're both going in the same direction with no kind of friction or no friction. And so this is the way to think about what we're doing in practice. It's not enough to just sit and understand consciously and try and figure out consciously what we're doing. We're trying to train the unconscious mind too. And the other thing I like about this analogy is it really gets to or it really shows that it's a bad idea to beat yourself up about this sort of thing. You can imagine the writer getting a stick to hit the elephant with, and it's probably not going to go too well. And it's the same way too when you try and force yourself into compliance with your conscious mind. And so the second aspect of harmony that I'd like to talk about is the harmony in terms of our view of the world matching reality. I've talked about the self as a distortion, a set of self-colored glasses that filter the world as it is into the world as we see it. And as this filter dissolves, that distortion becomes less and less. I've used the analogy of a dark hotel room or a dark room that you're pretty unfamiliar with. Maybe you're waking up at night and needing to go to the bathroom or something. If you're in this analogy, you don't have a good idea of the room, you you've seen it some earlier in the day, perhaps, but you don't really remember where all the furniture is and stuff. And you get up and try and go to the bathroom, and you run into things because you don't see the world correctly. And this is like what we do in our life when we don't see the world correctly. When we have these self-colored glasses on, we run into things. We think something's going to bring us happiness, lasting happiness, and it doesn't. We get hurt. So as we start to harmonize our view of the world with how it actually is, we start to have this experience of seeing anatta, seeing non-self. And at first we may, only get kind of close and not see it fully, but we start to have moments where the self fully drops away and anatta is seen clearly. Which, when we do this, this is seen in two ways, which makes sense because we have two ways of seeing the world, through the lens of the self and through from the perspective of our true nature. So we have these two perspectives of seeing the world, and this experience of anatta is seen in different ways, and those ways are very, very different. When the mind of our true nature sees anatta, it sees peace, perfect peace. The self isn't there, it's not grasping, it's just phenomena arising and passing away without reaction. And so that's seen as the kind of fruition of the path. But when that's seen through the lens of the self, it's the antithesis of all our desires. The self is this set of desires that we use to try and control the world. So we say things like, or we believe things like, I need the world to be this way so that I'll feel safe. And I need to be this kind of person so that I'll be loved. And this body needs to function in this particular way so that I'll live forever. When anatta is seen, those beliefs are shown to be a lie. And so the thing that one must accept is that you don't get to guarantee that you have those things. You don't get to guarantee that you have love or safety or continued existence. And that is very, very, very scary. So this one thing is seen in two very different ways. And so when you see anatta, like I guess coming at it from a Western perspective, I think many people might understand the process as like kind of like running a race with a finish line. So you run the race and you see anatta and you finish, and that's it, and it's done. That's not what happens. What happens when you start to see anatta is that a process of acclimation starts to occur. And it's very much a process. It's not something one and done. The analogy I have for this is like you may have had the experience of being outside on a cold day with a hot mug of coffee, and your hands are very cold, and so you want the warmth of the coffee. And you like put your hands on the coffee cup, but it's like much too hot, and so you can only touch it for a moment. And what you do is like you touch it and you recoil, and then you wait for some time, and you touch it again, and it's this process of doing that sort of thing. And so over time, your hands get acclimated to, having this, being exposed to heat. And also over time, as your hands contact the mug, you're leaching heat out of the coffee. So you make it easier to experience in that way. And that's the exact same thing that happens when you start to see anatta. It's this very painful thing. So you're not going to be able to hold on to it. But what happens when you experience it, even for just a moment, two things happen. You acclimate to that feeling of discomfort, that to being with the very scary truth of it. And you also, when you're resting in that, you're also uprooting kama. So you're uprooting the impulse to grasp. So as you do this over time, you're able to be with it more and more and more until finally you're able to rest in that. Um, and so in that way, this process of like kind of repeatedly holding the coffee mug and letting it go, that's the process of harmonizing our view of anatta. Um, it's not just I see it and I got to hold on to it. It's that process needs to occur. And so the thing to do in that moment when the process is occurring is to just surrender to the process. This is what's going to happen. The mind is going to grasp at this. It's just going to do that. Um, just let that process occur and notice the futility of the grasping. So the mind will grasp. It will never work. Just notice that it doesn't work. And over time, as you notice, the mind will eventually pick up on that and stop doing it. And the thing to do in the larger sense is to change your understanding of what you're doing. You're not just trying to get to anatta and hold it. You're doing this process. I guess the last thing I would say about that is that's a very good thing when that happens. There are kind of signposts in practice. They're not so much things that tell you like where you are along the path. They're just telling you that you are doing something that's good. And when you see one of these signs, it's just a sign to keep doing what you're doing. But don't get puffed up about it. I think that's what I have to say today. Thank you all.